Hello.
Hi.
Hi, everybody. Oh, how fun. This is exciting. Oh, okay. You're going to have to excuse me because I have to admit people as they chime in here. So if I look distracted, it's because I am. Welcome, everybody. You could turn your mics off if you want. We don't have that big of a crew. So we'll just kind of make it a little round table conversation. Let's see here. Okay. So we'll give everybody a couple minutes. I'm so glad we're doing this. This is really exciting. Were you guys all at She Leads Church conference?
Yes.
Yep. What'd you think of it?
Awesome.
Yeah. What were your highlights?
Oh my gosh. You.
Thanks.
It's nice to be able to do something virtual and be able to have it where it's not costing you an arm and a leg.
It was right.
Very well done. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. We were talking about it. I'd love your take on this because I liked also being able to go in and watch the things you had time to watch, or maybe in the order you wanted to watch it.
Mm-hmm.
But we're thinking next year of adding in like also playing like straight through, so that if you wanted to just have it on in the background or like chat with people as everyone's watching, a little bit more of like a both and. So like ongoing and, as you go. So
yeah,
I don't know, maybe that'll be a good addition.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome, everybody. Oh, this is like so fun. I've been looking forward to this all day. Okay, I'm going to keep an eye here on the room so that I don't leave anybody out, but I think we've got most people here. Oh, that's not what I want to do. Sorry, I'm narrating to myself as I get this going here. How do I undo? Okay, so there's just a few of us here. I think we have 20 people signed up, but usually we don't get all 20 people. We'll send them the recording. So if you guys want to take off thank you for everybody being on camera. I always like to see everybody's faces, and you can take off your microphone if you want to, or you can certainly leave it muted if you don't want us to hear your dog barking in the background. I understand that. My guy is right. Oh, usually he's right on the couch. Oh, he's down at my feet. Okay. He will probably make his presence known. So, or my 5 children. Very nice, Marilyn. Okay, so why don't we just go around, introduce yourself and where you're from. I'm Kadi Cole, and I'm in South Florida in West Palm Beach. So it's freezing here. It's like 72. Everyone's got their sweatshirts on today. I know, it's terrible. It's terrible. I'm going to call on you so that we don't have double over speakers. Alicia, since your microphone is off, why don't you go first?
Sure. I'm Alicia Anderson, and I live in Fairfax, Virginia, DC metro area.
Very nice. My dad lived in Fairfax for a long time. I used to visit him there in the summer. That's awesome.
We love it.
That's great. Cassia, did I say that right?
It's Kasha.
Oh, Kasha, beautiful name.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Kasha Glass, and I am in Houston, Texas, and I am up at the church right now. I'm in the our small groups and discipleship department, so really excited to get to be on this call. I'm a replay pass girl, so I'm slowly making my way through the conference. So and loving it so far. So
good. That's what we were hoping people would do. That's awesome. Okay, thank you. Kristen Riley, why don't you go?
I'm Kristen. My family and I live about 20 minutes north of Baltimore City in Maryland.
Oh, okay.
Awesome. Well, I guess I should have asked you what you guys do on your team too. Kristen, tell us what you do either for work or at church.
Yeah, so work is church, and I'm the welcome pastor at our church's newest launch. We officially launch on Easter. So
coming up?
Should be fun. Yeah.
That's awesome. Great. That's great. Kasha, tell us what you do on the team.
I oversee our mixed adult grow groups that meet in homes all over the sort of Northwest Houston area. So, and then I also develop our on-campus, we call them grow classes. We don't refer to it as Sunday school, but it's adult Christian education that happens on a Sunday morning. So,
yep. So the non-Sunday school, I gotcha. Okay. And Alicia, what is your role on the team?
I serve on on several groups. I serve on our women's ministry team, very active in that. I also serve in our choir leadership team. I take care of our music library. And I also work on our greeters and wayfinders team. And I actually lead one of our teams within that group. It's called our First Timers Table. We have a dinner on Wednesday nights at my church. Of course, right now, due to COVID, we're not doing that, but normally we'd have a First Timers Table. And each week I have a different person to kind of sit there. So if we have new people to come and visit, or just visitors to come and visit and have a meal with us, that somebody's there to greet them and make them feel welcome. So I do a lot of different things.
That's awesome. Alicia, you're busy. That's great.
I am. and looking for a job in the process as well.
Oh, gotcha.
Kind of in a time, just not really job searching, hoping some things are going to work out. As y'all know, we have Museum of the Bible here in DC, and I'm very active with that as well. And I help lead in on our ushers and events group, but that's a voluntary position, which I love. But hopefully
awesome.
Something to work out, for that, or this other possibility. So we'll see.
Gotcha. That's great. Okay, Mary Lynn.
Hi, I'm Mary Lynn. I live in Girona, Spain. This is a picture of my city behind me. And kids will pop in and out. I am in church planting. My husband and I are trying to plant a church here in Spain, and I just stepped out of organizational ministry or organizational leadership with our organization just last week. So I'm in between kind of leadership roles in that sense. And yeah, and I have 5 kids and my husband's in the States. And so I'm single momming it for a little while.
Oh my gosh. Well, all your kids are welcome to come say hi anytime they want to
they
for
will.
the next hour.
And this is my youngest. Say hi, Gabriel.
What city are you in again?
Girona, Spain. So it's about an hour and 15 outside of Barcelona to the north, closest to the French border. So
oh my gosh, that is really awesome and exciting. Thank you. Is this like a reasonable time of day, or are we actually seeing your kids awake at like 1 a.m?
It's like 8 p.m. right now, and our
so we're
home
fighting
base is
bedtime
Orlando,
too.
so we're Floridians.
Gotcha. That's awesome. Hey, Deirdre, it's good to see you.
Hi. Hello. Yes, I'm Deidre Jones, and I am in, well, it's not so sunny Southern California today. It's been raining. I'm in the San Fernando Valley, pastor 7 years now, my own church, and been in ministry for 30 years now.
That's awesome. That's great. And I feel like we've met before, right? Where have we met? Remind me.
You, bless you, came and did a podcast for me.
That's what it was. Yes. Oh, that's right. That's awesome. I'm so glad to see you. Were we in? Yeah, we were in person. Like we saw each other's faces when we did that.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, I'm glad you jumped on here. It's great to see you again.
Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, Sarah.
Where is Sarah?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yep, we got you. Great.
Okay. Well, I'm joining you from Poland. That's in Europe. That's like Marilyn. So I'm an elder in church. I'm a kids church pastor as well.
Oh, wow.
That's awesome. Well, we're so glad you're here. Thanks for jumping on. Are you the person who's been talking with our company about the book?
Yes.
Okay, great. That's awesome. So Sarah wants to translate Developing Female Leaders into Polish to be able to use with the folks in Poland. Isn't that amazing?
Oh, yeah.
I know. So we're pretty excited about that. Okay, Zoe Miller, you're on.
Find my unmute button. Everybody say hi, Zoe.
Hi, Zoe.
Hey, everyone. I think I probably emailed most of you.
This is Renee, by the way.
Most of you. I'm Renee, and I work with Kadi. So I just thought I would pop in while I sit outside my son's school and wait for him to get some screening done. And yeah, thought I'd at least say hi to you guys. And I'm so excited that you guys are all on here.
And the amazing Zoe right there in the corner. She's my delight. Okay. Miss Carol. Oops, you just muted yourself. There you go.
Okay. Yeah. Hi, I'm Carol, and I'm graduating from the Master's of Practical Theology program at the King's University, and we were one of the sponsors for She Leads. It's a great program if you're interested in it, but my husband and I have done ministry. We've done missionary work, taught English in China, done a lot of things. I'm currently on staff at the Seed Company, and the Seed Company is a division of Wycliffe Bible Translators. We do Bible translation projects all over the world, and my role is managing very, very large projects, including events to try to get the collateral, video, graphics, all the pieces together for large events, for small events, and to support our investor community. So that's where I am.
That is awesome. And congratulations. That is really exciting.
Thank you. Thank you.
So glad you're here. Yeah. Okay, Allie, good to see you, girl.
Yeah, hi. My name's Allie, and so I am in Indianapolis, Indiana. Everybody else has very cool like locations. It's like rainy and 50 degrees here. There's nothing exciting going on. But Indianapolis, Indiana, I've worked in ministry for about 8 years. My title is Strategic Alignment Executive. So I love strategy, basically taking strategy down into execution and organizing all the work in between. So it's kind of where I live. And I was in a cohort with Kadi. So kind of met her a couple years ago and then was part of She Leads. And so I just love hopping on and seeing other faces and hearing other accents too. That's super exciting.
Yes. So go check out Allie's talk on She Leads this last year. She did a great job. Okay. Last one, Charity.
Hi, I'm in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Yeah, we got snow yesterday. And then before that, it was super sunny and I had a sidewalk visit with someone. So the weather never makes sense, which is a bit like my life. I was pastoring for 22 years and during a pastoral change, was asked to resign and have been unemployed since May. So just have been seeking God about what my next is and trying to learn in the process. And that's where I am.
Awesome. Well, great. Wow. This is a big year. Lots of people are in your same spot for sure. So we'll be praying for you. And I know God will have a next season for you around the corner. I have a feeling. So awesome. Well, glad you guys are here. So one of my agendas always is to remind female leaders that we are terrible at networking with each other. And so if you already are like, oh, she was kind of cool, or where is she at? Like, chat to each other, trade emails, like make connections, do things that kind of help build your network. Because these are the women who like have it going on, right? The ones who sign up for the thing and show up to the thing and do the stuff. So I just want to encourage you. That should always be something we're secondarily doing in our mind there. Welcome, Beth. Sorry, you're on the spot now because introduce yourself. We just went around. Sorry you missed it, but tell us where you're at and the role you are on the team.
Okay. My name is Beth. I live in Iowa, and I just got this fancy new title thanks to you, Kadi. I don't know. You probably don't remember, but I had a coaching call with you.
I was going to say, I feel like we've met before. Yes.
Yeah, I had a coaching call with you several months ago. It was literally life-changing, and you encouraged me to get a new title. So I'm now the Director of Operations.
Yay! Congratulations.
Thanks.
Good job. Well, that is getting it is one thing. Asking for it is probably the bigger congratulations. So good job on that. So yeah, I think we might stumble into this, but that is one thing that I really encourage women to do is just to make sure you're thinking about your title. It's the easiest things for your bosses to give you to say yes to. It costs them nothing. They're not thinking about it, but it opens up so many more doors for you from the day you get it forward. And so don't be afraid if you're feeling like you want to advance or you wish something were growing or you've taken on a couple more departments than you had when you started your job a couple years ago. Just asking for a title that accurately represents what you're doing is one of the best ways to advocate for yourself. And then when you apply for a new job, you have a higher title, there's a higher expectation of your ability, you're paid more. So it's a really great way to sort of manage your own career. proactively. So, okay, little side note there that I didn't want to miss. So good job, Beth. Okay, so I think everybody sent in a question. I've got that list, but I'd really rather hear just have you say your question to me. So would anyone like to start with their question? Or if no one remembers what it is, I can look up the piece of paper. It's right behind my Zoom call on my computer. But who's got a question that they would like to talk about or get my take on it, or other people in the room?
I'll go first. One of the questions that I had was about, okay, so coming out of crisis, coming out of this year that we can all attest to as something we've never dealt with before, what are you seeing for the local church as far as in the future? I've heard stuff like innovation or even female empowerment. I mean, there's been a few things where people are trying to forecast and predict what 2021 is going to look like for the church. So would just love to hear your take of what you've been hearing as well.
Yeah, I'll certainly give you my opinion. So for those of you who don't know, my full-time gig is I work with churches mostly, and also tech companies. I don't know why. It's a weird mix of the technology world and churches. I'm not sure how they go together, other than they're both run by a lot of men and they both tend to grow and change really fast. So, so my thoughts are just my thoughts. No one knows what the future is going to hold. And that's true anytime, but it's really true right now. I do think the leading voice on this is Carey Nieuwhof. So if you're not following his blog, I find his blog the most efficient way to get all the information he's giving out. And then you can go to his, 11 podcasts and all the resources he has. It gets a little overwhelming for me at this point because he's full-time at home just making content. But the blog at least lets you know what's available. So he's the most research-based and I feel like the most balanced view of it. Plus, it's a Canadian perspective, which I feel like it's out of the American egocentric kind of mentality we sometimes have. But for my take, a few things. One, I think that this is probably not in the next 6 months. This is what I think is going to emerge from the churches who make it, who will be around 5 years from now. I think the mindset shift will go that we are no longer a local church. We are now a global local church. So once everyone put their weekend service, which took some of them all of 3 days online, they became a global church. Anyone in the world can access them. And I think most churches are not paying enough attention to that because there are people probably in each of your churches, if you've still got things happening on the weekend online, even if it's a horrible Facebook Live from someone's phone in the front row, there is someone from another country, 3 states over, that knows someone at your church who is going to church with someone in your church. And the network of people versus trying to rely on advertising or community reputation is the new normal for church attendance. It's what I call pre-assimilation. I've been a huge fan of this, that when people come to your church new, you find out who do they already know there and help them sit with them, help them go to membership class with them, help them join that small group because they already are connected. You want to access those connections, not pretend like they left their entire world behind when they walked into your church and they need a whole new set of friends. So that idea that every church is now a global church, one of the reasons I feel like this is important is because in the multi-site world, we were already seeing these trends happen. The multi-site lines between campusing have already become very fuzzy between that and church planting and mission work. So when someone had a missionary, maybe that they launched, like Mary Lynn, like someone's launching you, right? They're probably also thinking she could be in our outreach budget or she might be our next campus. And so that line has become very blurred. Most people who were doing international missions, especially if they'd been around for more than 20 years and had kind of old mindset, many of them became campuses because it became easier to share resources. They were able to establish their partnership more. We're seeing a lot of churches do that as people are moving away from jobs. They'll take, as a company moves and relocates its headquarters, they lose 150 people. So they start a campus in this weird state they never would go to, but they brought a pod of their people there. And so now we just have more options for that, more availability of that. I hope no church takes their weekend service off, but I think it's helpful to think of that weekend service as its own online campus, which is generally the church I came from. That's what we did. We made it its own campus. We gave it its own campus pastor. We staffed it like a campus. It was really our largest campus. Our next largest campus was 10,000. Our weekend service online was 60,000. So if you think about a 60,000 person campus, how would you staff that? Well, we did what most churches did. We put a part-time guy there. Like, that's ridiculous. We can't do that anymore. I'm sorry, my dog is driving me crazy. Okay, go outside and have fun. When I start talking with my hands, he thinks I'm talking to him and he wants to be a part of it. So the second thing is the other trend I'm seeing is that I believe connection is the new excellence. Connection is the new excellence. So if you're like me, I grew up in the 80s and 90s in ministry and then have been leading in the 2000s. And excellence has been everything, right? Because if you've been in church a long time, I grew up in a church where like Christmas Eve service was basically open mic talent show, right? Me in fourth grade playing my recorder, We Three Kings. I did it every year, right? Wearing my little corduroy knickers. It was horrible. It was horrible. The services lasted like 3.5 hours long. It was terrible. No one wanted to be at it. It was not seeker friendly at all. And so we started shifting and saying, gosh, God's got better talent than fourth grade Katie with her recorder, right? And we want to represent that. But I think we've swung the pendulum so far over that now we have basically created a whole generation of church leaders who are perfectionism oriented and very consumer based. And it's not really what church is supposed to be like. We don't need to help Jesus look cool. We don't need to help him look awesome. We don't have to help God be attractive. He is attractive. We have to try to not make him unattractive. That's our bigger issue. And so I think God has sort of taken us from, we went from one extreme to the other, and now he's hopefully going to help us settle in the middle, which is put your service online, use the people God brought to you, and do your best. But as you're doing it, do it to build connection. Excellence is no longer the thing. If you see the people who are killing it on YouTube right now, there is nothing excellent about them and their phone putting on makeup or playing video games on, Reddit or whatever. Like, there's nothing excellent about that. People want to know that you get them. They want to know that you want to interact with them. They want to know that you care. So congregational care, pastoral care, I think will be the new commodity coming out of this, similar to how churches evolved out of the 40s into the 50s, where you had communal sized churches with a shepherd pastor. In the 80s, we started saying, what a shame that churches are all under 100 and there's all these shepherds pastoring people. We need leaders. Well, right now, people don't need leaders. They need someone who's going to pray with them, help them put their kids back together, create a food bank, help you get a job. Like, they need to be shepherded because we've been in crisis. And so that's why, to me, connection is the new excellence. It's connected with your people. It can't be reliant on people showing up. This is like shut-in ministry should be flourishing right now. I don't know any church that has shut-in ministry. When I was growing up, that was like a staple, right? Because everyone who gave money was shut into their house because they were old and couldn't come to service. And we still considered them part of the church. Isn't that amazing? But today, if someone doesn't come back to church, we think they've left us. And that's a leader mindset, not a shepherd mindset. So connection is the new excellence. So every church is a global church. Connection is the new excellence. And I would say the third piece is that as we lead forward, we have to fight for diversity. It is not something we can draft off the culture. We should have been leading and swimming upstream on this anyway. And as Christians, we fight for things, right? Nowhere else in our spiritual appetite do we settle for what's easy. But for some reason with diversity, we're like, no one wants to come. Women just don't want to lead. That's on the other side of town and people don't want to drive. We aren't fighting for it. And I think God has sort of used this as like this. He kind of took us by the face mask and was like, you're not listening to me, right? So let's like have riots in the street and make you pay attention. And so for me, if you guys know from my book, it's not so much about us helping minorities do things. It's about us as leaders leading differently. We have got to lead differently. We have to change our cultures. It's not about gender equity, racial equity, economic equity. It's about leaders who are equitable. That is the key. And so we have to own our own stuff in that and create churches and environments that welcome everyone, and not only welcome them, recruit them, want them, build around them. It's missionary mindset versus come and see how awesome I am mindset, right? When you're a missionary, you go in and how do I speak this language? How do I build trust? How do I create relationships? We don't say, here we are, come see how awesome we are. You come to me. We go to them. That's how we fight for diversity, in my opinion. So those are the three biggest things that I think churches who will make it forward are they may not even consciously be knowing they're doing this, but these are the actions they're taking right now. They're not letting these moments pass us by. I'd love to hear if you guys if you agree or have other thoughts.
Katie?
Preach, Katie.
Who wants to go for?
Alicia, did you
Okay,
have something
I'll
to
go
say?
ahead and say something. Our church, when all the pandemic started, that was, I mean, we never dreamed we'd have, nobody ever, I thought, number one, you're going to have a pandemic, which we did. Number two, oh, gee, how are we going to function and go forward in church and this and that and the other? Our church went virtual. I mean, that was it, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. We did it. And you're right. It has gone global. It has been, we've had people from all over the world watching our services and wanting to be a part. It's amazing to me. And one of the other things I wanted to say is we have a food pantry, which is very active and just growing by leaps and bounds to help people and those in need. And the other thing I wanted to tell you is that we're in a building program now. My church is Columbia Baptist in Falls Church, and our pastor, Jim Bauckham. And we've been figuring out, because we're going into a building program, building a new church, how are we going to draw new people in? Because we've lost people. People have died from COVID in our church. We have people that have moved. We've had people to say, well, I'm not coming to your church because we got to wear a mask, stuff like that. So we are really having to look at rebuilding our church and coming back. I mean, this pandemic is really, I think it's hurt a lot of churches, a lot of people. Yeah. But the one thing I wanted to say is that we went around, we did some investigating, what is going to draw people into Columbia, into our services. We used to have, 3 services, 3 on Sunday morning, 1 on Saturday night. Well, we've decided, no, everything's changing now. So we have a contemporary, which will be at 9:15, and then our traditional or more, church I grew up with at 11:15. But one of the things is, what's going to draw these people to come into the church? So I was on a team and we went around and did some investigating all these different churches.
Hey, Alicia, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm being kindly reminded that we only have an hour. And so we should put all of our comments in the chat. So
sorry.
I will pause the thing, but I would love to hear what you found out from your survey though, because I think if you're doing that kind of information seeking, that stuff that all of us can learn from and what your ideas are. So in the chat, if you don't know where the chat is, if you put your cursor at the bottom, there's a little chat bar.
Okay.
So if you guys, as we go through some of these questions, so I don't, no, that's not you. I should have known that. You can add your examples in the bottom, or if you have other questions that we want to ask, add your stuff there. Because again, one of the things that we can do is really help learn from each other and get ideas for our churches from each other. Because at this point, it's easy for everyone just to be reinventing the wheel. And so I love the survey idea. I love re-switching your services, even asking the question, what is it that will help bring people back? Like what can we offer that they can't get at home online? That's always the thing. And just to build off that for a second, Alicia, one of the things that's important in this online world is to realize that for most of us, if you're over probably 40, we look at online as a great supplement to the face-to-face conversation that we have, right? So like, I know my parents, and Zoom has been awesome to stay connected to my parents far away when I couldn't travel to see them. For my son, who's 17, he builds a relationship online that then creates a face-to-face experience. So much of what we're doing with having a global church, an online global church, is we're saying, hey, here's the first step at building a relationship. And eventually those people are going to show up at your campuses. They're going to travel on vacation to come to your church for vacation, right? Like it's going to lead to that. So it's not the thing we do while you can't come. It's the first step to actually create engagement for real church, not real church, but for church and all that we know and appreciate it to fully happen. It's a different on-ramp. So that's a great thing to keep in mind and to be tracking with people as they begin to be more regular attenders. And if any of you are working in the welcome team, the newcomer team, the new member team, any of that assimilation world, this is the place to be looking for your newest people. People are hungry like never before, and getting all your kids ready and masking them up for another day outside the house is not going to be how they check you out. It's going to be online first. So things like Google searches that show up with your messages, making all of your sermons available on YouTube that they can watch at any time. It doesn't have to be one time and place. Creating some even mailers that would say, hey, watch our 6-part series on helping your family love each other through isolation. You know, any of the, even repackaging old content and getting it out to people that they can watch on demand. It's how we all do it, right? Like I'm like, oh, you like their podcast? I go and listen to a series from 2 years ago. I'm not listening to today's message. I'm not listening till something comes out tomorrow. I'm going back and listening to an entire archive of stuff and learning so much. So real time is not what real time used to be in this space. So there's a lot that we get to explore with that. Okay. Thank you, Allie. That was a really great question. I got to like regurgitate my little 3-part message I've been giving everybody. So I hope that was helpful. What else? Who else has a question that they would like to ask? Yes, Carol.
So my question, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see you. Go ahead.
Who do you want to go first?
I'm sorry. Now everyone's moving. Okay, Kasia, go ahead since you started, right?
Okay. So my question is, so we're making changes within our church to move the bar so that the women on our church in our staff have more of a voice. We have very few women in leadership at our church. We're trying to make changes to that. So beyond some of, like, there's certainly hiring metrics we can look at, but what are some other metrics that I can help drive us to put in place so that we know that we have moved the needle, so that women feel freer to talk about their issues, that we have women who understand, well, what is our professional development pipeline? Like, how do you get to into more of a teaching, preaching role, things like that. Can you talk a little bit about what are some metrics that we can build into the changes that we want? So it's not just an idea, but we have some specific milestones that we can put in place.
Yes, that's a great question. So I have a question for you. Do you guys have sort of a formalized development process established for people to grow in spiritual and organizational leadership?
We do not. We are all over the map.
All right. As is almost every other church out there. So what I would say is one of the best ways you can start looking at this is to think through what's already being offered in your organization in terms of development. And you can probably look at the people who have sort of come on the scene and done really well. If you can find 3 or 4 of those, even if they're guys, and be like, who did they spend time with? What job did they have? What role did they play? Were they seminary grads? Were they not? Did they come from the marketplace? You can start to see this really organic pipeline. And I would just say the best thing you can do is just articulate the organic pipeline. It's not going to be perfect. It won't work for everyone. But if you start to explain a roadmap towards promotion, I called it the pathway to promotion. It's not a guarantee. We're not looking for people to check off the boxes and you're automatically senior pastor. Like, we're not doing that. But this is the pathway that most people take that allow for promotion to happen. And if you explain that, even if it's a 1-page PDF document that's like, lead a small group, begin coaching small groups, help launch a campus, join staff in a weird unpaid role with no title, and now you're a pastor, right? Like it's usually something like that. And so if you can articulate that out, then people can start following it. And then you start measuring the metrics. Well, how many female small group leaders do we have? Have any female leaders become coaches? What's the percentage? What's the percentage compared to men? What's the percentage of racial minorities? What's the percentage of people outside the window of 30 to 40? Like, are all of them 70 who become coaches? Are all of them 19 and they sign up and they don't know any better because it's a horrible job? Like, what is it that the metrics are telling you? And are they advancing? And the key is not so much we got X number of people through. You're looking for trends. Really, metrics only tell us trends. So that when we look at the trends, we're saying, wow, 80% of guys who are small group leaders become coaches. 5% of women who are small group leaders become coaches. Why is that? It doesn't even matter if you had 5 women and 1 became a coach and it doesn't matter the numbers. It matters the trends. We find that women get promoted to coach, but they drop out after 6 months. Why is that? Let's go call all 10 of them from the last 2 years who have dropped out. Why do you hate this job so much? Did we miss something? Is there something in that culture? This is how you can identify that you have a leader who is not great with women, right? So you're looking for those trends or any other. And I would just say, if you start measuring diversity around women, measure all the diversity, because it's like, what you're going to do for this is 95% of the work. You might as well do the other 5% and measure everything and actually build this like together culture, find out where you're missing. Then you can also start looking by ministry. So in children's ministry, women, rise to the top, but men don't. Why is that? I find that children's ministry is one of the most gender discriminated ministries in the church because it tends to not involve men, which, if you think about it, if you actually want kids to have gender equity in their spiritual formation, they need to see men and women leading together. And the only leaders they see is in children's ministry. So it becomes a really strategic place to use diversity of all kinds in children's. So those are the kinds of things that you can start measuring. And I just wouldn't get hung up on our pipeline stinks. You just want to create the pipeline you have, and then you can improve that over time if you need to. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. I see the hands raised, but I also cut off Carol earlier. So Carol, you go first, and then we'll do Sarah and Deirdre.
Yeah. Thank you. So mine was sort of a follow-on on that. In where I grew up is the saying was, the gift makes your way. And you go into a church and you work and you hope like heck someone recognizes you and then promotes you. One of the key things I heard at the She Leads conference is that kind of leads to people pleasing, overproduction, overpromising. How do we do that? Do you have any practical information or practical steps for us to say, how do you work with excellence, get yourself known, but not go into that people pleasing routine that we get into?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And that is a hard kind of double bind that women can feel caught in a lot. The research calls it the white horse syndrome, where we sort of do all of our things and then we just sit around and wait for the guy on the white horse to come in and notice how amazing we are and like promote us, or we spiritualize it and we're like, I just put my head down and when God's ready, he will, right? And the way I talk about it is I always try to balance being really honest with being very honoring of the environment you're in. And part of being really honest is being honest about who you are, what you bring to the table, what your gifts are, what your experience is, what are the things God has laid on your heart, what do you want to grow in, what are you passionate about, what do you dream for yourself one day. Those all fall into the honest category. And I think sometimes for women, we shrink back from being honest about that. We undersell ourselves. I know I've done it plenty of times. I can be standing talking with a pastor and a female leader that he knows well will come up, and I'll be like, hey, so what do you do on the team? She's like, oh, just a little of this and that. And I'm like, I know that can't be true. You're a full-time employee and you have access to the senior pastor that you can walk up and he knows your name. You must do more than a little of this or that, but she's waiting for him to be honest about her role, right? So we can do a better job stewarding our own reputation, what people think of us, by having the elevator pitch ready. I'm the director over all the campuses. I oversee our 9 campuses plus our School of Leadership. I'm really excited about how we're growing so fast, or whatever, right? I'm not lying. I'm not inflating myself. We don't make up titles. We don't say that we're the best thing ever to ever come to our church, but you can honestly answer the question. And then at the same time, you're honoring about who you're around and what you're doing. So like examples that I've experienced is when the young bucks come out of seminary and they show up at my church and they're all sending me their resume and they're taking my husband out to lunch and they're like making their presence known, right? It's actually a bit dishonoring because there's a system, there's a process, or they over spiritualize. They're like, I just want to be a custodian because I so love what's happening here. And I'm like, well, we actually have a custodian position open, but I've noticed you've not applied for that one, right? So it's like, so be honoring of the system, honoring of the process, honoring of the people. So you want to apply for the jobs when there are job openings, but you don't need to have one-on-ones with every single person on the team or send your resume. Now, if there's something you're passionate about, if you love missions, then ask for 20 minutes with the missions guy and say, I just wanted to let you know I'm here, right? You can have your resume in your bag, but you don't have to lead with it. You want to honor what they want to know about you and go in with the soft, honest, but honoring. I think anytime we kind of fall into the traps of I'm going to hang out with his wife and become really good friends, right? That's just like Christian manipulation, right? We want to be honest. We want to be upfront and we want to honor the system. And then we leave the rest in God's hands. So that's what I would say, knowing how to articulate. This is why I advocate getting titles, because I meet women all the time and they're like, I'm the director of miscellaneous. I'm like, really? They gave you that title? Actually, I know they didn't give you that title. You offered that title up and now you're hiding behind it, right? What do you do? If you were in a business, what is your job? Now, there's no director of miscellaneous in any business I've ever consulted. It doesn't exist. It's not on salary.com. Say what your job is and then own it. And if you're doing a bad job, then deal with it. But at least own the job you've been given. Does that make sense? Great question. Okay. I can't remember who I said next.
Sarah was up next.
Thank you. Hey,
Hi,
Sarah.
everyone. Hi, how are you?
Good. Hey, we didn't meet you earlier, so tell us where you're from and your role on the team.
Yeah, sorry. I was at a pastoral lunch that went over, and so thanks for letting me join in late.
You get no demerits for being late. We all get it.
My name's Sarah. I'm at Mountain Christian Church that's north of Baltimore in Maryland, and I'm the associate campus pastor at one of our campuses here. So that's my job title. There's my job title. So one of my questions that, especially I popped in when you were just talking about like going and speaking the language and being a missionary and that adjustment to make. And in a lot of ways, our church has done so many amazing things throughout the pandemic. But one of the things I've noticed is as we've been re-emerging and regathering, the language that we've been using a lot from our leadership has been engage. And when I'm hearing the word, we need to get our people to engage, it's so much of the come and see. Like when you were saying, like, we need to shift from come and see to go out and be missionaries, that just resonated so much. Because it's like, okay, let's re-engage and let's get all of our people back in the building and let's get all the serving roles filled. And that just doesn't feel right anymore. So my question in that culture is, how do we lead up to when we don't necessarily have the leadership influence to shape the culture, but how do we still influence the leaders that are above us that are the culture shapers?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, you're in a perfect role, especially if you and your campus pastor are kind of on the same page in terms of what you might need to do for your local context. At the end of the day, results will always carry the weight. And so I would say if you're wanting to try and experiment with some other strategies that maybe aren't coming from on top, you always have to honor sort of what's being handed. Mm-hmm. But I would just encourage you to also be open to supplementing that with other strategies and see where the fruit is. There's no senior pastor in the world who's going to say, oh, you got 100 people back and you're the only campus, what you're doing should stop. Like they're going to say, tell us what you're doing, right? How is this working? Why is it so different? It's one of the beauties of being in multi-site is that you have a chance to test some of these ideas and see what the result, like compare in real time the results of it. So I would say that would be the first thing, is that sometimes when you're going a little outside the norm because you sense that innovation or you feel like God is opening an opportunity for you that might even really be more about your particular gift mix or your unique anointing and calling that's for such a time as this, no one can legislate that. You can't systematize calling. So either way, I would encourage you to, like, those are the times where like you do work a little extra, you do go outside the norm because you feel like God's really in it with you. And then the results might influence change. I think if you're trying to be proactive about it, what I always tried to do was never shift the focus, but add to it. So I'm always like, can we, yes, relaunch all of our campuses. Can we add a line that says, and love better than ever, or, whatever. And so it expanded the umbrella where I could flourish where I feel like my people were at without going outside of it. I just probably emphasize the love other people better more than the relaunch. But in the scheme of things, no one would know that, right? Internally, I know I'm got different percentages, but we do that all the time, right? So you lead a campus, you give a certain percentage to students, a certain percentage to Sunday morning, a certain percentage to staff oversight. And depending on the needs of all your, leadership kids, you change that and titrate it to whoever has the biggest need. So this would just be the same kind of thought. So that's probably the easiest way to influence up, is to expand what they're saying rather than limit or shift it. I think too, right now, it's just important for all of us to have a lot of grace for our leaders. Especially I think guys who are established. I don't think we should let them off the hook, but I do think, probably for many of them, I know because I coach a lot of them, and for many of them, they've never not known what to do before. Like they maybe were figuring it out, or they maybe said they didn't know what to do. We'll just see if God shows up. But actually, they knew exactly what they were doing. And I would say most pastors right now, the reason we're seeing the mental health crisis in our leadership ranks right now is because they honestly don't know what to do, and they're not used to not knowing what to do. This is why I think actually female leaders are probably going to flourish, simply because God is going to open doors, because women have not known what to do for decades. We have had to scrape, cajole. We're under-resourced. No one wants to come to us. We never get up on the platform. We never get space in the bulletin. Like, we've built ministries with much less than what we've got in COVID. Now we're all exhausted because we've got 9 hats going on at the same time. But women, to me, are not crashing in confidence or identity like I see the guys crashing. Women are crashing because they're exhausted, because they're doing 6 full-time roles. So that is an issue, but I think the leadership roles are going to go to the people who have had to figure it out on their own up until this point. And man, when you're scrappy and you get a real role with a real budget and maybe even a team, sky is the limit on what you might be able to do. So I think this is the time to lean in to the opportunity.
Thanks. Yeah, that's good. Encouraging.
Okay, Deirdre. Oh,
there we go. Yes.
Gotcha.
Thank you so much. Your last comments actually just segue right into my question, because I have been doing it on my own. I started with a limited team, and when we launched, and a year and a half into the church, I had to move to Sacramento, 300 miles away, to help my bishop run his church, because he and his wife gave birth to triplets. So and they already had a 4-year-old. So he went on sabbatical for that. And so what I did was my own church. Okay, it's a year and a half. In Sacramento. So we've been fully.
Okay, something's going on.
Yeah, sorry.
There you go. Now you're back. That's okay.
Yeah, my internet connection is funky here at the house.
It's amazing how it always happens when it's your turn to talk, right?
You
probably have had no issues.
It's true. It's true. So I've been full years now. Duct tape, paste it together, figure it out, and figure out how to engage, how to connect, how to build groups, how to reach people in an environment where they're used to just, social media snacks as their, Christianity. So now that things are beginning to open up, and I have a sanctuary that I've finally been able to build up while we were on. Here's my thing is now I'm searching for a team, and I'd like diversity as far as especially gender roles, being the female lead pastor. My community is largely Latino. So stereotypically they're more, male dominated in their thinking. And so what I'm finding is looking for male members of my team or speaking to male peers. Of course, there's the mansplaining that I have to deal with, but I'm having a difficult time bridging this gap of like, we're peers. I shouldn't have to teach you. I don't want to have to teach you. I don't want to be forced into a role where I'm looking like I'm trying to usurp your authority or be aggressive over. Yeah, that's been a challenge. How do I balance still being the leader, being in charge, and gaining that vision and not like overstepping what they think are my boundaries?
Yeah, I mean, that is a tricky one. I think probably the best and healthiest way to deal with it is to have some really good one-on-one conversations about those boundaries and about the authority and who has what authority, and just making that as clear as possible and letting people opt out if they're not comfortable with it. Because I think if you're trying to basically play two roles simultaneously, which is I am in charge and I'm the leader, but I don't want you to feel like I'm the leader, there's no way that's going to win. And even though we all do that all the time, we know there's a weight to that, right? It costs us, and we start to lose who we are because we're always trying to kind of put a different part of ourselves forward. But it's really hard to follow someone who feels like they give a different answer to every different person. So what I would encourage you to do, it's probably an opportunity for you to kind of elevate up into a next level of clarity around your own leadership, is even if it's just very simple, like these are the things that I am going to focus on, and these are the things you are going to focus on. And you don't even need to write it like an org chart, like I'm up here and you're down here. You can even just put everybody's name next to each other. This is what we're accountable for. And a lot of times when I find a lot of hierarchical mindset, I'll use the term accountability chart versus organizational chart or hierarchy chart, because we're really just outlining what we're all responsible for and what are we going to hold each other accountable to. And so you can easily say, I'm accountable for the vision. I'm accountable for hiring and firing. I'm accountable for answering to the board, right? You're accountable for leading the weekend experience. You're accountable for recruiting people to do this, right? So it's a division of labor more than it is a hierarchy of power. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think that will help as far as drawing people in, to consider them for positions, that I can start from that level instead of already having them a part of my team and then having to like play and do that later. So yes, thank you.
I also think, now this sounds like a very stereotypical comment, so I don't think this is like all men, but I do think when you're in male dominated cultures, one of the highest values is respect. So now this isn't a commodity for all men, and there's plenty of men in those cultures where this doesn't matter. And there's plenty of guys outside the culture that you don't need to worry. But when you're dealing with a cultural mindset, it's important to understand the things that have the highest value. And so respect is one of those things. And so respect is almost always affirmed publicly. So what you might do strategically is find ways to affirm your respect for people publicly that might have very little to do with organizational authority. Right. So I respect Joe because of his long-standing relationship with the Lord. This is a man of integrity. This is a man who loves people deeply. This is a man that I know we can count on to give us godly advice no matter what is happening. Do you see how you just affirmed all these things about him, but you didn't make yourself less than him to do it? And guys do this all the time to make women feel better about themselves. And it's very confusing to most women, because a guy will get up and say, I just can't even find my keys without her, or she's the glue that makes my world run. I'm like, well, if that were true, then we should fire you and let her run the world, right? So it's like this false platitude that we all know is actually just trying to make her feel better, but it's not honest, right? It's not, it's lying. And so that's where we fall into this honest but honoring piece. And so part of, I think, a piece of it is, how do I speak the language that means the most to this person without doing it at my expense? And that's where you get out of the double bind, is you can affirm them without making yourself less in the
Right.
process.
Absolutely. Got it.
Yeah.
Thank
Great
you.
question.
Thanks.
Great question. Okay. Anybody else have a question? We are at the end. So if you need to jump off because we're wrapping up here in the next few minutes, please feel free. I will not be offended. And we are recording this so we can send you the rest of the conversation if you want to hear the rest of the Q&A. But yes, Alicia,
Katie, I
go
have a
ahead.
question. How do you feel about women in roles of being deacons and then more in leadership, being pastors and stuff? Because I know there's some churches that, you know, especially in the Southern Baptists, that don't believe that. And then others, I mean, my church is not like that at all. We're all for women and men. I mean, what is your view on that?
Well, usually when I talk about this, I think what's really important to know is that these are like real theological disagreements among Christians who all really love God and believe their Bible. And so I call these secondary theological issues, right? They're not things that would separate you from fellowship, like spiritual fellowship with someone. Like if someone didn't believe in the Holy Spirit, or, you know, Jesus is one of many ways, right? We would say, I can be friends with you, but we're not going to have communion in a spiritual Christian way together. But the issue of women in leadership is like many other secondary issues. Things like, is it okay to drink alcohol? You know, you can make a case for either side in the Bible. Can women hold formalized leadership of roles in the title pastor or preach from the weekend? You can actually make a biblical case for any perspective on that. That's why it's controversial. So for me, what I try to champion is that churches are clear on their theology and the biblical case for it, because you want people to do what they believe the Bible is saying, and that their culture matches that theology. Where we really get into trouble is when we say we love women, but they never hire a woman, right?
Yeah.
Or we don't allow women to lead, but there are women leading all sorts of ways, but they don't get the title or the pay or any equitable acknowledgement. I've got issues on both sides of the theological spectrum. And so for me, it's about owning what you believe and then living that out in your culture. That's how women can be empowered to lead the most. I grew up in a variety of different churches. And so even churches that had a lot of boundaries around women leading, I, as a 12-year-old, got to do a lot, because there's very few things that's appropriate for a 12-year-old female to do. Like I never thought of myself preaching on the weekend at 12 years old, right? So I just got to do all these wonderful things. It didn't shift my view of myself. There were other consequences to living in that environment, but it wasn't detrimental to my view or what I got to learn at 12 years old. So that's why I'm a champion for all churches being clear and then making sure everyone's, you know, operating off the same page with that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Who else had a question?
I have one that I'm sure could be a longer conversation, a longer response, but just in one of your books, you talk a lot about like the male social networking space versus the female, and those differences. So just any practical advice on how to penetrate into the male social circle, or if that's even the right way of approaching that, and just how to use our voice to get into those spaces.
Yeah, kind of the old boys club kind of thing, that sort of deal.
Oh yeah, that's what I call it. I actually, on a positive note, I did get invited to Boys Club Happy Hour yesterday. So like,
girl, that's huge. Yes,
it was amazing. But just curious, outside of that, just like, how do we get into that circle?
Yeah. It is a tricky one, and it's actually worse in the church than anywhere else, because we have a lot of loaded fears around men and women socializing together. So I'll tell you some of the things that I did. I think all of this really has to be personal and authentic. So what I could not do is like go into the fantasy football league because I know nothing about fantasy football and I have no real interest to do it. And so I think, but if you're into that, like I know a lot of women who are total tomboys and love sports. And so they build a lot of relationship with the guys they work with on those commonalities. So I think the key is you want to find the commonalities that are actually common between you. And I found that it's different with every person. You know, I think as someone who was usually the only woman or definitely probably the first woman or one of few women, I just really tried to break it down into one-on-one kinds of relationship building. And part of that is because I'm an introvert. And so I'm never going to like come in and like wow a room of 30 guys unless I'm like the formal speaker. So the social network, the hanging out at the coffee table or the, you know, the coffee bar kind of thing. So finding those connections where you build one-on-one, kind of a kindred friendship, a brother-sister relationship is the first step. I think the second step is making sure you're keeping relationships alive as you work. So one of the things that can really set women up to fail in this area is that we just take our jobs so much more seriously than the guys do because we have to, right? We do need to perform better. We are getting judged harsher by other people, but especially by ourselves. Many of us are carrying double shifts at home. So like I can't hang out from 3:30 to 5 and shoot the bull and whatever. I'm like, I got to be in Carline. I got doctor's appointments. I got homework to do. I'm cooking dinner, right? So sometimes I had to make strategic decisions to give up some of that social networking because I had more important priorities, but I had to know that, drop the expectation and do other things to supplement it. But I wasn't going to ever go. I wasn't going to be in those conversations where you all decide to go on vacation together, right? I've been on teams where they all took their family vacations together with everyone but me. And I'm like, it took me a while to piece that apart, but I'm like, oh, you guys are drinking Red Bulls and playing ping pong twice a week for an hour on company time, might I add. I did not say that to them, but it's irritating to me. And talking about everybody wanting to go skiing. And then my wife wants to go skiing and blah, blah, blah. And our kids. And now we know a instructor that we could take with us. And some high-end donor wants to pay for it all. And so I go, you know, I'm like, everyone's on vacation the same week. Isn't that weird? And they're right. And so like, those are the moments where I'm like, I chose this because you know what I did? I got my kid through 4th grade algebra and I would make the same choice again. But there is a consequence. So and that's my dynamic in the role that I'm in. And I don't want them to not be friends with each other. I don't want them to not go skiing together. But I did say, hey, I would have at least liked an opportunity to say no to going. Like if you could just be aware enough to know that when you're all excited about your big fire pit beer Bible study every Friday night, that I'm the only one on the team not there. And so please don't make decisions without me. Please don't put it on the agenda. Hey, we were talking last Friday, or I come into a meeting and I'm the only person who's not up to date on the podcast you all listen to because you discussed it. Right. So those are the dynamics that I'm like, I'm standing up, not for me. I don't need to be included. This isn't about me not being liked. This is about how we run our team. Right. So but I also know what this world is like, right? Because I can get together with my girlfriends and 2 weeks later, my husband finds out we're going on vacation with all these people and he knew nothing about it. Right. So I'm like, I get how this works. I can easily do it also because leaders are fast and they like connections, but that's not great for my marriage. And that's not great for this team. And so I stand up for our team. I stand up for my role. I stand up for awareness so other women can have it better. But I don't stand up for myself feeling included. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I think one of the even challenges that I faced, and I like that you said like the relational one-on-one stuff, because as I'm playing some of these conversations that I've had with my male coworkers in my head, they have been on the one-on-one sphere, not in the larger sphere. And so I'm also unmarried too. So I often have felt like I'm a threat just because I'm not married.
Yeah.
And I've said to a couple of my male coworkers, I'm like, just so you know, I'm not interested. So you don't need to be me. Like, just because I'm a single female does not mean that I want to do anything with any of y'all. I'm not interested. But I want to be a part of the team and I want to be included. And And just trying to find the right language. I don't want to be like that bratty little sister that's just like wanting to get invited into the circle, but also recognizing important things happen around those circles, at happy hours, at golf outings, at all of these things that women are not typically included.
Yeah. So one strategic move is to always build relationship with your guy coworkers' spouses. So that was something, it's an extra step. It's a little bit unfair, but it makes a huge difference because most of the guys aren't worried. Most of their wives are worried. And so when you create a third relationship, right? And you're saying, I see you, you're important to me, I'm for you, it takes away 95% of the fear. And so I was always really good, particularly for men that I led. I always like sent birthday cards to their wives. I sent birthday presents to their kids, like, you know, that the church bought the cards. I'm not saying I can't afford to do that, but like, I always tried to say, I see your family. I see you. All of you are important to me. Right. And so it just kind of mitigated, right? Because who reaches out to a wife that you're trying to have an affair with her husband, right? That you don't do that, right? So it's the thing that says, I'm proactively preventing your fears. And it takes a while. And I'm very careful. Like I do almost nothing that could be misconstrued, right? But I'm still going to stand up for being on the team, and I'm still going to allow all of these things to happen, and you know, all that kind of piece. So that's another to making sure there's relational time in your meetings, and even asking for it if you don't have it. What ends up happening is a lot of these pastors who have kind of a brotherhood mentality about their church is, in their mind, particularly in high school, college, seminary, they can think of nothing better than running church with their best guy friends, right? And almost all of them had some guy retreat or discipleship group at 6 a.m, or they were in the all guy dorm at some conservative college, and they're trying to recreate this experience of like intense brotherhood that they probably didn't have in their family, right? Because there was a mom in their family, right? This is like this all guy thing, and I'm trying to recreate this and put it on my job in my church. And it almost always crashes and burns. Like I talk with all these pastors in their mid 30s, and they're like, I had to fire my best friend, and my brother-in-law is actually a jerk. And I'm like, well, yeah, you're trying to do something that jobs aren't made to do. And so it doesn't work for them, but they all are longing for it. But what ends up happening is they segment out what should be happening at work. So you should have relational time at work, but they take that piece and they put it at the bonfire, right? And you should have mentoring at work, but then they take that out and they do it at the conference when they take only their friends. So all you're left with at work is all this task. So we come in and we do an hour of task, and our whole relationship is work tasky, and we're doubling down on the task to get invited to the other things. But the more task we talk about, the less they want us at the other stuff. Do you see how it like creates this really horrible, unhealthy cycle? So you're the one who has to break the cycle. So a lot of times what I would do is I would say, now this goes against every other thing I write about women doing the agenda, but I'm like, if I write the agenda, I control the meeting, and no guy wants the agenda. And so I would do the agenda, and then I would assign a devotional to every person, and we would rotate, and we would take the first 10 to 15 minutes. Someone had to do a devotional, do prayer requests. It's like what every Christian team should do anyway, but they're doing it at the bonfire. I'm bringing it back into work where it belongs. We don't do it for an hour. I try to be the only person who doesn't cry, right? Like, but we redo it all. And you start molding those lines together, right? Then you might have someone once a month, maybe you do a book together. So now you're reading and mentoring instead of the guys at the conference, right? So you start bringing work stuff back into work stuff, what healthy teams should be doing. Or even if you can't be in charge of the agenda, I just did it because it was faster if I could own it, but you can ask for it and be like, could we just once a month, or can we read some books together? Or it would help me to grow with you guys. I want to learn from you, but I have no opportunity. Or even be honest and just be like, I feel like you guys do all these things together. I need it to happen in a space where I'm at. So I either need to be invited, or I need to start doing it in the office. Can we make, you're being flexible, but which one can we do? What I'm not flexible on is not being included in work stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so good.
And it's important because you probably don't have women at your church who can do that. Like they have 1,000 men in their city who can help them do this. you've probably got 2 women and they probably don't have time to do it with you. And so that's what it's like when you're at a male populated environment, is you just don't have the same access they have. And so it's their gift to give you what they can do every day for lunch. You just want once a week at your meeting for 15 minutes. You're not asking for a lot.
Yep, that's very true. There's literally 2 women in a position above me at our church. So you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah. So this is why I really encourage women to ask to have a paid coach, to get a female coach who's paid by your church, because they're already paying a whole bunch of guys to coach the men on the team. Like anytime you see one of them have a one-on-one, hang out after staff meeting, send a text, take them out to lunch. They're on company time mentoring the men on the team, and no one's doing that for you. So the church should pay for both of you to have it.
That's a good point.
Okay. Any other questions? I don't know if everyone got to ask their questions, so I've got about 15 more minutes for anyone who wants to do it.
Yeah, I have a question. I wrote it down actually. How would you can you hear me, guys? Because yeah, okay.
Yep.
How would you stir in church leaders need to, it's like you talked in your book about setting up boundaries for churches and like owning their like what they believe in. So how would you stir in leaders need to own it, to actually like set the boundaries and the rules and like what they really believe in regarding women in ministry?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I recommend churches do whatever process they do for other theological issues. This isn't a specialty topic. So if your elders make theological decisions, then your elders should get together and decide this. If your pastoral staff does it, if you hire experts, if you're part of a denomination and their beliefs are your beliefs. So whatever it is you do for every theological issue, how you get to heaven, how often should you serve communion, what are people's titles and roles? Are you pre-trib or post-trib? Like all of those things, this is one of the theological issues to be decided. So that would be my recommendation, is to figure that out. So on my website, I've got some resources like a theological cheat sheet that you can see different theologies around this that might help. There's a list of books that can help you identify your theology if it's not defined for you already. And there is a ton of writing out there about this subject on all sides of the viewpoint. So it's really a matter of whatever that process is, doing the due diligence and the research. I do recommend you take it slow. It's not something that should be like decided in a weekend and, do a 6-week sermon series about it. Like your congregation needs to be brought along for the journey, especially for women. It's a very deep personal issue. And a lot of guys get caught off guard when they open up leadership for women and find that so many women are resistant to it because of their own upbringing and what they believe to be biblically accurate. No godly woman wants you to change the Bible to make her feel better. No one wants that, right? So if you're changing something, I need a biblical case for why you're changing it and why you're telling me that the things I've been looked over for the last 15 years were actually things I should have been doing. And how are you going to pastor me through that conversation? It's a big one.
Oh, thank you.
Yep. Good question. Carol, did you have something?
Well, I would like to expand a little bit because finding mentor, this is a question about mentorship. Finding a mentor as a woman is very, very difficult. You talked about paying for a coach. That's brilliant. I've never thought about that. Is there anything else we can do to foster that mentor, whatever we define it, as we're moving up the leadership ladder? Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think having people teach us leadership is a challenge for every person. And the higher you go in the organization, the fewer people there are, to formally learn from. But I think, especially in the roles that most of you all have, you're seasoned leaders, you're in high level leadership roles. Everyone kind of hits a lid in this level of leadership where all of a sudden you realize I might actually know more than the people making decisions above me. It's very disconcerting It's a little bit of an identity crisis. And so you got to start going sideways. You need to go to different industries. You got to read books. You got to listen to podcasts. You got to lean into the Lord. He's going to like tailor your leadership development from this point forward. You're beyond easy answers. You're beyond 20-minute devotionals at church staff. Now, those things might speak to you, but you guys are smart. You're leading at high levels. You need experts. And so you should be reading Jim Collins. You should be reading Henry Cloud. You should be listening to podcasts every week. You should be finding when you're stumbling in your leadership, you need to reflect on it. You need to get feedback. What's the core issue? And then go research that issue. Everything from here on out is really customized to you and the journey God's taking. You can't go to a conference and just have everything relate to you. They're doing the cookies on the bottom shelf. You guys are top shelf people. So you got to go after the information you need. Now, the skill sets you need to do that are self-awareness, humility, and asking for feedback. You have to be willing to think outside the box. And part of what getting a mentor does is your mentors are going to come from really unexpected places. And so I really encourage women at your level to look for other professional women who are Christians who are leading in other arenas, because those are the women who are being offered opportunities that are higher than yours, that are going to raise your leadership capacity, right? If you need to learn how to have a full-time assistant, please don't go to someone in the church, because we have very few full-time assistants and almost no one leads them correctly. They're all like the daughter of my best friend, or it's an intern that we're taking on that's not good at administration. She's actually a worship leader, but we don't let women lead worship. So now she's my admin. It's like horrible. So go where someone's really good at that, or follow the people. So some leading Christian voices like Deanne Turner is vice president Chick-fil-A. She just retired and is doing a lot of writing and podcasting. She's a great person to follow. I'm a big fan. I mentioned Jim Collins, Patrick Lencioni, Henry Cloud. They've all got great programs on higher level leadership thinking. Trying to think of my other go-tos. I mean, really any business book, any business leadership book is stuff you guys should be taking in, and you'll stumble. It'll be that one paragraph because they're coaching leaders who are the mentors you're looking for. So they're coaching people all over, and then they're taking that content that they're learning from their clients and putting it into a book. So it's 2 steps removed, but that's how you're going to find it. And then just stalk the crap out of people online. Like if there's someone from She Leads, like one of the reasons we try to do She Leads is we're like, here's 30 women you could send a message to, and they will 99% of the time, they're going to reply back to you. Right. So you can follow them, you can reach out to them, plan a phone call with them. Right. So that's where it's like, it's up to us to find the network and to find the people who can help us. Our bosses don't know what will help us. We hardly know what will help us, but God knows what will help us. So you just kind of have to find your way. Does that make sense? Yeah. I do think that like at some point, I'll just speak to you all like grownups that you are, but like, I do think that one challenge for women is we tend to stay childlike in Christian environments, particularly that are male populated. And what that does is we kind of keep this open, teachable. I want to be humble. I want to be open to feedback. I just want to learn. I don't want to be presumptuous. We're also afraid of our pride, but our pride is operating at like -1%, right? Most women who have survived what you survived to be in the roles that you have do not have a pride issue. You have a humility gone astray issue, right? And so shrinking back and staying teachable is not what you need to do. You have things to say, you have knowledge to give, you have things to lead, and you have people you need to go find to add to your repertoire to move you up a level. And so if you stay open and teachable to whatever miraculously comes to you, you're staying childlike. You're not becoming that healthy, assertive adult that knows who you are, knows your strengths, knows your weaknesses, and goes and finds the resource you need to help you go to your next level. Now, open to feedback, yes. Only living for feedback and believing someone's feedback more than what you think yourself, I think those days are over for all of you. Now, if you were 20, I would be telling you, you don't know nearly as much as you think you do, right? You're an intern. Listen, don't speak. I'm great podcast idea. 30 years from now, you'll have something to say, but for right now, but you guys are not doing that, right? You guys know what you're doing. In fact, there was one gal who did a She Leads talk and I saw her raw footage, I have never seen someone in their head so much. She was second guessing everything she said. And I finally I sent her a Marco Polo and I'm like, girl, get out of your head. Like, you know what you're doing. You do this all the time. The camera is freaking you out. Something is going on because you are good at your job and you know what you're doing. And she's like, well, my husband gave me some advice before I started and I was trying to do what he said. And I'm like, you know yourself better than your husband knows you. He's giving you the advice he needs, but you need something different. You're almost 50 years old. Do what you know you need to get ready to do a talk. You've been doing talks for 30 years. Why would you throw all that away in 30 seconds before you do one of your best talks ever? Does that make sense? And we've all done it. Like, the reason I can call it on her is I'm like, the dumb 21-year-old sound guy says something to me and I believe him over myself about whatever, right? Like, this open, coachable thing is an important spiritual quality until it prevents you from being honest about who you are and what you know to do. Does that make sense? Okay. That's my little soapbox for today. Charity, do you have any questions? I'm interested if there's anything we can do. And then I know we got to wrap up here in a few minutes.
Do you know what? I don't know that I have a question that's specific. I'm trying to figure out what my next is. Like, I've been a leader for 22 years in the church and transitioned from a kids pastor to an associate pastor role, and asked for a title change, and then was asked to resign and because of a pastoral change. And so it became an identity crisis for me. Of I'm single, so the church was very much my world and my friend circle, and you put in the extra time because you have it. And so I'm just trying to figure out what my next is. And there's not a lot of churches that are hiring right now. And I've never not had a church. I've always been called to my next before I was done with my current. So I'm enjoying what you're saying, and I don't know that I have a question. I wish I did.
Well, can I give you a couple ideas to consider? So one thing I just want to let you know is the higher you go in leadership, the more likely you are to be transitioned out when the leadership changes. So that is not, I mean, only you would know if you had some other issues, but it doesn't sound like you did. And so I think part of what you need to maybe work through in your own mind, and sometimes this takes a really good therapist, is to separate out what you just experienced from what was really going on from a leadership perspective. And so that is very commonplace. It's not a ding on your resume. Every person who's a hiring person is going to understand that dynamic. And so finding your voice in it, finding the line in it that says that you can speak, that's honest and honoring about your previous role. That's like, I got 3 promotions in 10 years. I love being there. There was a change in senior leadership and he decided to bring in a new team. And so I transitioned off, and that can be it. And everyone will get that. So please don't give any more attention to that or make it question anything about you or make it dim your light on your future, because that's just a normal thing. In the business world, it's a lot more common, but it's still a thing that happens and everyone will get it. The second thing is that don't be afraid to take a rebound job. I find people who have long-term ministry careers sometimes have a hard time giving themselves freedom to like work at Starbucks and have free coffee for a year or become a substitute teacher because it needs to pay the bills. You're not violating your calling, doing something that lets your heart mend, lets your relationships recalibrate. I think church ministry, when it's also your entire social family network, it's even more so when you're single. And when you're an all-in leader, which you obviously are, it's a lot to transition. And it's awkward and it's painful and it's difficult. And moving off of staff, even at a church that you stay at and lead as a volunteer, a lot of the relationships you thought were really close but they are no longer. And some relationships that you thought were lifers, the other people didn't think of it that way. And that is a lot to emotionally process when basically you're recalibrating your entire support system. And so you're going through one of the hardest times of your life without any of the resources you've invested in having to help you in hard times. So I just want to acknowledge that that is a really big deal. And, you know, greeting people at Walmart for the next year feels kind of like a reasonable decision. So don't be afraid. I think people feel like they're violating their calling or they're running for God or they don't have enough help. Every time I've transitioned off of staff, I've had to have a rebound job just to give my heart a little time to settle. I could do a job and perform well and remember I was good at stuff. I could remember there's an entire world out there that is not in the little microcosm I just left. And it helps you remember what you're really good at and who you really are. And that is a really important thing, to be able to say yes to a new calling without any baggage. And so that's really your goal. It's not to get to the new calling. The goal is to steward well the space in between your assignments so that you can go into the next one without any hindrances. Does that make sense? Okay. So good therapy, good girlfriend sessions, some job that you don't have to live in financial stress, that you can do with your, you know, eyes closed, that just keeps you going and connects you with a lost world again. Because I think sometimes the longer we're in the church, the more it's easy to lose touch with where culture is really at. And there's nothing like a secular job to remind you what people really need from their pastors. So you will have a new assignment. I just have a feeling God has paused you to debrief some things, recalibrate some things, and put you in a new space. And the church is reinventing itself, by the way. And so I have a feeling waiting a year or two and landing in the new thing rather than living through the messy middle could be an amazing gift that God is giving you.
Thanks. That it is kind of how I feel.
Good, good. And you never know, your calling could shift dramatically and you could be doing something totally different. So I just think it's good to be open and not overthink or, I don't know. There's a lot of things in our church ministry leadership cultures that I don't see in the Bible very much. And so there's nothing like a worldwide pandemic and losing your job to make you rethink what scripture really says. So I think God will bring you through it. Okay. Any last questions real quick, and then I'll kind of wrap us up and close us in prayer, if that's cool.
Katie, real quick, can I lead a team of admins? One tip that you could give me to motivate one of my admins that's been on staff for 20 years, way longer than I've been here, and kind of resists doing things differently, which I've been doing lately.
Yes. So, well, 20 years anywhere, especially if you stay in the admin world, like her world has shifted dramatically over 20 years, right? 20 years ago, there weren't even computers on desks or like laptops. So her cheese has been moved for sure. So I would say anytime you can honor someone's longevity and perspective when you're creating change, gives you, first of all, you add to your decision-making when you bring in an older long-term perspective. It also allows that person to have a little bit more time to process change, because anyone who stayed in the same role for 20 years is probably not a big change person. Like that to me sounds like death. I would like to have a new job every 6 months, right? And so she's probably wired very, very differently than you, and she's a late adopter to change. So giving her as much advanced notice so that she can embrace it as close to everybody else as possible. And then just getting over the fact that she's probably never going to cheer it on. You're never going to feel approved by her. She's not going to be someone who wants to encourage you to keep moving forward. The biggest resistance I've ever had to my actual leadership in action has been older women. Because you are doing things she was never probably told should not be doing. Even if you're in a very open, progressive church 20 or 30 years ago, she was told many of the things you're doing right now were sinful. And now she has to support you doing it. So there's always going to be a conflict for her. So the fact that she's still with you and will have a meeting with you is like a good sign. So I think I would just lower your expectations. It's not about your leadership, especially if you have several admins and the rest are doing great. You know, you've got an issue about within her. It's not you. And so I would just do a lot of kind of that customized situational leadership that really affirms and respects without you shrinking down or making it sound like you want her to decide for you, or that you don't know what you're doing and you would like her input, but like respectful, like you've been here a long time. I want to tell you some of the things I'm seeing that I think need to improve, and give you an idea of where I'm thinking it can go. And I want your feedback ahead of time. I want to know what you think. Am I missing something? So it's not like, do you think I should do it? It's like, what? So I'm very strategic with the phrases I use, the kinds of questions I ask. I'll do things like, I wanted to lay out my plan to you and see if you had anything to add. So you don't get to criticize anything. I'm not taking anything away. Do you have anything to add? Right? Remember when I was telling you about the umbrella, right? I have something to add. Adding something is easy, right? And then you can just put very little percentage of emphasis on it, but it's on there, right? Having her, derail something is totally different. Is there anything I'm missing? Again, that's an add question. What do you think the biggest, where am I going to find the biggest resistance to this? Like what department, what person, who, like, where do I need to do extra work? Those are all perspective input that you actually would benefit a lot from.
That's good. Thank you so much.
Okay. You're welcome. All right, ladies. Well, I'm going to wrap us up. Let me pray for all of you and the other folks. So thanks for jumping on. This has been really great. I hope it's been helpful. Okay. We will, Renee will send out, there's probably questions for me here. I'm sorry. I'm so terrible at this. In the chat are some good resources, it looks like. What podcasts do I listen to? Oh, I'm very eclectic with my podcast world. I'm a huge Holy Post podcast person, especially if you're interested in like American nationalism and sort of the impact that's having on our Christian viewpoint. That is an interesting, you might not agree with it, but it's a very interesting take on that. I try to listen to a lot of more like life things. Like right now I'm binging on President Barack Obama and Billy Joel have a podcast together on their friendship. And I'm just like amazed at this, right? Like, I'm just like, I have got to listen to these two have a conversation with each other. So that's what I'm working on now. I listen to Carrie Newhoff quite a bit. I try to do things that are not in my normal circle. Like I like my brain to be stretched. And so I tend to rotate around podcast people. So especially like, I've given you two, like, so Holy Post is a little critical of sort of like American nationalism. I try to always have a mix. I try to understand where people are coming from. So if you know me, I'm like, I like all theologies about women. Let me help you do better. I like all the perspectives. And I want to understand where people are coming from, because that's what I feel like makes me have the best thoughts, is when I understand all the perspectives. So right now I'm listening to a lot of young African-American pastors talk about race and dialogue and church. So yeah, but I'm very eclectic. 6 months from now, I'll be listening to completely different things. So that's my deal. Okay, so let me pray for us. Thanks so much for being here. God, thank you so much. Lord, just thank you for what you've done in the last couple of weeks. Just She Leads Church, just such an amazing time, and just really bringing so many women together. I pray for even, especially all the folks that are continuing to watch it, would you just speak to their hearts? Thank you for these incredible women taking this time to go deeper in their own learning. I pray for each one of them that you would just bless them abundantly, that you would speak to their hearts, that you would give them your supernatural wisdom and insight, that they might have the knowledge of your will for their life. I pray you would build them with a sense of the calling that you've given them into all the areas that you've called them. Lord, I pray that you would open up incredible doors of opportunity. I pray that you would reveal to them personally, quietly, lovingly, the things in their character, the habits in their leadership, the mindsets, anything that is off. Would you just, in your loving kindness, would you lead us to repentance? God, we want to represent you well, but we want to represent you fully. And so would you continue your sanctification in us and your ministry through us? And Lord, at the end of the day, I just am so grateful for all that you've done for us, for the opportunities you're presenting before us, that you've chosen to make us alive in this time and place in history in your church. What a crazy experience, but what a privilege to be here. Thank you for entrusting us with that. And I pray you would continue to build us up that we might represent you well. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right, ladies, thank you.
Thank you. This
Have a
was
great
so
rest
much.
of your
This has been
day.
great. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you,
Awesome.
Katie.
All right. Take
Bye-bye.
care.
God bless.
Bye.
Bye.